Do you ever wonder what you can do with the pieces of 2.5-inch strips and binding pieces that you have left over from your projects? Well, today I'm going to show you how to use them and make a really pretty quilt on point. So you're taking the straight pieces and you're creating a quilt on point with any leftovers and scraps that you've got. My name's Elizabeth and I like to sew smart. So let's get started. So these are strips. When I come to the end of my quilt, any leftover fabric, if there's not a tremendous amount of it, I cut it into 2.5-inch strips. Now you can use it for binding or you can use it for quilting, whichever you choose, but I've got various colours in here that I have made quilts from and some reds which I'll pop on the top. So you're left with your strip right across the fabric. Now for this quilt I am actually going to use some blues I had left over. I didn't have much of the floral blue, so I've started with a 1 1/4 inch strips of the blue. Then the other 3 cuts across the fabric I've got, there's a pale blue at 2 inches, a mid blue at 2 inches and a darker tone on tone at 2 inches. So I've got 3 2-inch strips and the other one is 1 1/4 inch. Now you will need, for the quilt that you saw behind me, which is just a lap quilt, you will actually need 6 strips of any colour. You can use multicolours, it doesn't really matter, but I'm using these ones because I've got them left over. So you will need 6 1 1/4, 6 of the pale blue 2 inch, 6 of the mid blue 2 inch and 6 of the darker shades 2 inch. So here are your strips all cut. As I said, you will need 6, or if you want to make a bigger quilt, however many you can cut. Now all it takes is you will stitch them together in that order, 1 1/4, 2 inch, 2 inch, 2 inch. Stitch them together, press them out, push your seams to the one way, iron them to the one way. So you've now got this very long strip of the strips all sewn together. The next step, and there is a template for this in the pattern, is to cut them with a triangle. Now I have actually got a triangle. I have a template, but I've cut a paper piece, which is, you can cut out from the pattern the exact size you will need, and all you will do is put your template, your paper pattern on, and you will cut alternately. So you'll cut one that way and one that way, all the way down your strip until you get as many out as you can. And it's really easy to do, but make sure you pin your template on well and you cut quite accurately here. Because you've cut diagonally, on one of your triangles you'll have the little pale piece, a very tiny triangle on those two, but this one of course will have a bigger piece. This is a 2-inch strip, so you're going to have a bigger piece on this point, on the point of this one. So I'll now show you, using the other quilt that I've made, how that all goes together. This one I made up as an example is actually flannel, so it's got a little bit of stretch in it. So I've put it here on the top here so you can see it, but it is a different fabric to the cotton. But I had these pieces of baby fabrics left in flannel, so I decided I would try it out first on that. So I'm now going to show you how this goes together. It looks very nice, on point, and you'll see how it forms. This is your big square and this is your 1 1/4 strip. So that one will go on there and this one will go next to it. Then there'll be another going just to there, and the last one goes in there. So you can see how your square is is forming. Well, now you've got this now forms a border of your square, so you will need now to, this one now has got to have, I don't know if you can pick it up with the camera, but there's the little square there is this stripe. So this piece will now go onto here, and this piece will go onto here. And then you're going to have two more pieces. That will now go onto there. This is just clinging on to the flannel, it's not pinned on, and that one will go onto there. So you can see how it builds up. We're going to stitch it in rows, so when we do come to put the next piece on here, no, that's not the wrong piece, sorry, picked up the wrong piece there for you. When we come to put the next piece on there, we can put a following piece there, and we can do it in rows. So you can see how you form your on point square just by repositioning your strip pieces. To make it simple to put together, we're going to make the squares up. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 squares on each row, and to do that now I'm going to take them off, and each triangle is stitched together with the other triangle down the long diagonal side. So I will pin and stitch that to make one square. This one will go that way. If I can, probably can't keep it up there, just about. So we'll stitch down that one, and that will make 2 squares. I will repeat it for the other 2 on the top row, and then I'll come back and show you how to put those together. In order to keep your triangles together, and obviously once you've got a diagonal cut, it will stretch a little bit maybe, so pin with the points together on the top of your triangle, and pin it again in the middle to the bottom, so that you'll keep your bottom seam. You can see you'll keep your fabrics together and make a perfect square. So I'm just going to start sewing now, using a 1/4 inch seam all the way through. Just sew down right to the bottom, and just make sure you keep your points as smart as you can. All the way down, and then you've got your perfect square. I've sewn my triangles together, and the seams all go the same way. Now you need to cut them back. Each square needs to be now cut back to 7 3/4 inches. So they need to be 7 3/4 inches, so that I've cut them a little bit bigger all the time, so that you can line up these perfectly, and you need to trim a bit off. When you sew triangles, of course, they're not always perfect unless you do them in a certain way. So to cut your triangles into squares, you've got them sewn together, now you want to cut your squares, you need to put your, I've got a 9.5 inch rule here, you need to put the line on your ruler, the diagonal line, along the seam here, along this seam here. So I've now got this lined up, and I'm going to trim off to 7 3/4 inches. So I will just run and make sure that's on the line. Yes, run this along there, and this along there. Make sure you're accurate as possible. I'll turn it round. And now I've got my 2 straight edges that I have just cut, 7 3/4. Again on this diagonal line, there's your 7 3/4 inch line. Can you see that line just there? 1/4 inch away from the 8, just there and there. So now I'm going to trim the other 2 lines, and the diagonal line on my ruler is on that seam line. So I'm now going to trim that off and that off, and that way I know that my squares are going to fit together. So I've done the first 2 here. You can see they line up nicely now. This one is now going to go onto here, and you can see that's going to line up really nicely now. And then I'll cut the last one of my first row of 4. I'll do that in exactly the same way. So once I've got the 4 squared up one by one, making sure I've got my pattern right, I'm going to turn them over, pin along this edge, making sure again that I line up my strips, 1/4 inch seam all the way down. I'm going to do this one and the end one and then put the 2 together. I've stitched all 4 blocks now together. This is the top left hand corner, and as you'll see, I've left where I'm going to join this onto anything, I've got a 1/4 inch seam that I've left on all sides. The only thing to remember now is that when you join your blocks together, make sure that one row of seams goes one way and one goes the other. So when you put them together, you haven't got 2 lots of seams going in the same direction. So that row is now complete. I've pressed it, and I'll now repeat this process on the next 3 rows, and then I'll come back and show you how the rows all go together. I've completed my 4 rows. I've just popped them up here so you can just get a little idea of how it's going to look. Now the next step is to join this row onto this one, and then onto this one, and then to this one. So I've got 3 stitch lines to do, and I'll just show you about pinning that, because it's important that you line up your seams accurately before you stitch. So this is my top row, and this is the next row down. I should probably have had it the other way around for you to see, but I'm sure you get the idea. Now the importance is that you've got your 1/4 inch seam allowance here on this center one. So the important thing to remember with this is, remember to take that seam one way and this seam the other way here. So you can see that. Those you're going to line up and pin them. Have to be pinned on the stitch line, so when you come to join them, they will line up. Do that on this side as well. Sorry, do it on this side too. Just a pin so that they come together in the exact spot. Once you've done that, you will need to line up all your others. Now they should meet. You can see that they actually on here they will meet, but you just need to make sure that they do, that these seams line up, because you want the continuous square that's going to form a continuous square when you've got it together. So that's the importance of doing it. So make sure that your lines all meet on as you stitch across. Pin it well and sew it very carefully. I've stitched the top one, I've turned it around for you, the top one to the second row, and I've still got my 1/4 inch seam on the right and on the left, and as you can see in the middle, just here, the points meet really nice. They meet nicely here and here and here, so I'm happy with that. I'll now go ahead and stitch the bottom pieces on, and all the time remembering to line up these 3 middle seams first. I've stitched them all together, but just a little hint here, to make sure that your quilt is actually square, if you fold it diagonally, so which I've done, you fold it diagonally, all your corner points, I'll bring this around here for the sake of the camera, all your corner points, look, they will be nice. This one again, this point here, they will fold neatly. so you know that your work is square when you finished your quilt. So I have now got my top of my quilt all finished and all ready, and I've decided that I'm actually going to I'll put it down here for you, that might be easier for you to see. I'm actually going to put a strip of border on. So I've chosen that purely because I've got more of it than any of the other pieces I used. So I've cut this at 3.5 inches. So by the time you lose your 1/4 inch there and your 1/4 inch with your binding, it will be a 3-inch strip all the way around. And then my quilt top's complete. So here we have our finished quilt. I've just pinned it roughly on here to give you a better indication of what it looks like. And where I've used the plain blue, you can use any colour as long as you pick up the square. That will keep it looking fairly nice. Use anything you've got. And it measures 36.5 inches square, so that's really good for a lap quilt or a wheelchair quilt. You can add your squares and make it into a single bed queen size quilt, whatever you like. The object is to make it with what you've got that's scrap, and I think it's a really nice project. And if you've enjoyed this video, then I hope that you will give us a thumbs up and subscribe, because it does help. And I'll see you next time for another project.